Hello, all lionfish hunters, both experienced and those that are wanting to begin to help rid our seas of these invasive species that are ravishing the fish that we love to hunt and spear. If you're interested in building your own lionfish bucket, I'm going to show you how I've done mine. I've had a number of people ask over the last few years from the videos that they've seen me post on YouTube and Facebook. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through the progression that I walked, and then you can decide what you want to do. Certainly some of the different commercial produced ones out there, the Zookeepers, probably the most popular one, are great units, but they are a bit pricey. You can probably build what I'm going to show you for maybe 20 bucks. Maybe 25, depending on where you get some of your supplies. So first thing you're going to need is a 5-gallon water bucket or a 5-gallon water bottle. The 5-gallon water bottle can be found from any of your water delivery companies. You can even buy them in a lot of the stores. But if you know somebody or you get water delivery, check with the delivery guy, because often these get damaged to the point they cannot continue to use them, and they'll usually give them to you for free. I know my water guy does. Whether it gets cracked or punctured, it no longer is holding water. So this is definitely the beginning point. I would definitely recommend the ones with the molded in handle, because it makes not only a great place to hold the bucket when you're putting lionfish in it, but getting it in the boat, just dealing with it when you're emptying it. Lots of different ways to go there. The second thing you're going to need is a funnel. Now, you can go a lot of different directions on the funnel. I really like this large 6-quart funnel. It is called the Fill Fast Funnels. It's actually made by a company called Miller Manufacturing. I'll put some information in the description box below where you can get this funnel, but to me this is the best that I found so far. The type of plastic they use is pliable enough that it gives without it being too flimsy once you've cut slits in it. We'll get into that in a little bit as to how to cut the funnel. So then there's a couple different directions you can go once you start putting it together. This was the first one I made. It came from some people down in the Bahamas that had made a similar bucket and had posted some information on the internet. And that's where I originally got the idea for this setup. Of course, I started using that funnel. I love the fact that it has this large lip. It makes it a lot easier getting the fish into it. Whether my hand's on the side or I'm holding here somewhere, I'm less likely to have my hand up over the top where one of the spines may stick into my hand. Definitely not a pleasurable experience. Then to get the fish out, some people will actually every time, cut a zip tie, remove the funnel, and dump them out of the same opening where the funnel is. But then the idea was there to put the boat hatch in it. This worked okay. I ended up putting the door handle. I found an aluminum door handle on there because it was very difficult with just the notches built into it to get enough grip on this, especially after it had been at depth. It just seemed to get jammed up, and we'd be pounding on it with our dive knife trying to get it open, and then somebody would actually turn in the wrong direction trying to get it off and just make it even tighter. So I made sure they knew which direction to turn to get the boat hatch out in order to dump the lionfish out of the bucket. So I used that for probably a good year or so before collaborating with a friend of mine who was working for a pool service company, and he got the great idea, and I've started to see even that original website where I got the idea for that has picked up on this same idea of using a chlorine bottle. Now, the perfect size is a 2.5 gallon. You can go to pool service stores and very likely find that they may have an empty one they'll give you. Or find a customer or a friend that has a swimming pool and let them purchase one in this size rather than in the real large buckets, because those get too big around to fit up with the water bottle. So I actually purchased mine. I'll put some information again in the description box below from a company online, and I bought a few. I just kind of played with the shipping costs versus the number of buckets to make it the most economical, because I've made a few of these for some friends and diving buddies. Then it comes out looking like this. So this is the bucket I'm going to mostly demonstrate how to build, because it has been the most functional for me. It's got the ratcheting lid from the chlorine bucket that comes off. Much easier to dump the fish out than out of the bottom of that boat hatch. And it has just been great. So that's kind of what I'm going to walk through. So what I want to do is first go over materials that you'll need, at least what I have used. Already talked about the 5-gallon water bottle. So again, whether you get one for free that's no longer good for holding water, or you go buy a brand new one, it'll work. You'll need the chlorine bucket. Again, 2.5 gallons, made by M&M Industries. I've found the one with these large rim lids. They do have some smaller ones with a little different ratcheting design on it that I believe would work just as well. You just need to make sure that the lid has enough of a flat surface, because you're going to be cutting a large hole in this in order to mount that funnel inside of it. We'll get to that here in a minute as well. Then I talked about the funnel. Locally, we're able to get these at our Ace Hardware store. They carry them. It's about maybe eight or nine bucks. Again, I'll put a link to where you can get this same funnel down in the description box, and that would work great. Zip ties. You'll need some big zip ties. You'll notice I like using the larger ones than some of the smaller ones. I think it just is less likely to tear into this pliable plastic of the funnel. Just makes it a little bit more sturdy and hardy. So pack of these, any of that large size will work. You don't need the extremely long ones though. This works fine. Then you're going to need, of course, I also, in order to attach the lid of the chlorine bucket to the water bottle once the top is cut off, I use post screws. I found some aluminum ones. Again, I'll put a link in the description below, and those work great. Again, we'll get to that. I use 8, but you could probably get by with just 6, or you could use some stainless steel nuts and bolts, and that would probably serve the same function. But again, you're going to have that bolt and that nut sticking out one way or the other. This is just very low profile once it's done, and less likely for you to scratch yourself or it get hung up. And then in order to make sure those stay well attached, I just use some blue Loctite, some of the removable Loctite thread lock. So that's a great idea to use that as well. You're going to want to have a marker, because you're going to be marking places where you're going to be drilling a lot of holes in that funnel. And I'll kind of go over this as well, where to drill the holes and how many. So having that Sharpie marker is a great idea. You're going to have some kind of a razor knife, because then you're going to be cutting from every other hole down through the bottom of the funnel. Now this funnel, you'll notice if you do decide to use this funnel, it has a screen bottom. So you're going to be cutting that screen off, and then you just won't have quite as much of that flat section on the bottom because we're cutting that screen off. Really doesn't make a difference at the end, just as long as that screen is out of the way. Let's see, of course having some safety goggles is a great idea. You're going to need a drill. The holes that I drill in the funnel, you just have to make sure they're big enough for the zip ties to go through. For me, it was 5/16. All right, so a 5/16 drill bit for that. The only other drill bit I use, anything between a 3/8 and a 1/4, because what I do on the bottom is I drill a number of drain holes. Now, the water doesn't drain out of this very quickly, but it certainly does help. Whenever I am handing the bucket out of the water into someone in the boat, I'm always handing it to them funnel side down. I've never had even a small lionfish come out of the funnel, but a lot more water drains out quickly. I can hand the bucket up to someone in the boat, and they can grab either the lanyard that I've put on it or by the handle, and it gets much lighter much more quickly when that water comes out fast. So that's the 2 drill bits, the zip ties. Of course, you're going to need some cutters to cut the extra of the zip ties off after you've tightened those through. Some kind of a cutting tool, because you're going to have to cut the top portion of the water bottle off. A Dremel works great. I actually use this as a wood blade. It cuts right through it, no problem. And then you're going to be cutting the hole in the top of the chlorine bucket lid as well. So those are everything you're going to need. Then I'm going to start going through the actual process, give you some measurements that I've used. Certainly tweak it yourself based on how you might like to do it, but I will share with you how it worked out for me with the few that I've built. All right, step 1 to me is cutting the top of the water bottle off. Depending on who you get your water bottle from, they may have this ring around it that gives you a great guide for where to cut. Well, I want as much bottle left as possible. You can cut down lower if you don't think you want your finished Lionfish bottle to be as tall. But in the area I live, we've been finding quite a few lionfish on some spots, and there have been many dives that I have stuffed that bucket so full I can't get another fish in it, and there's still fish on the reef that I'm on. So I've made it as big as I can. You can make it shorter if you like. So you just decide, if you have this little roughed up area, gives you a good guide to cut around on it. I'm going to cut around up here at the top, okay? So I'm going to go outside so I don't have as much of a mess in here, and I'm just going to cut all the way around on the bottle, okay? So the other thing that I'm going to do is on this lid. I'm going to measure. What I want to be able to do is for this funnel to fit down in that lid so that this widest part doesn't go all the way through. Just going to give it that much more strength, less work that those zip ties have to do to keep the funnel from going into the bottle, staying on top. Okay, so that measurement has worked out great for me to be 7 3/4 inches roughly, 7 3/4 inches. And then you're just going to center it up on that spot, draw you a circle, and then use your Dremel or whatever kind of cutting tool you like to cut around there and make that hole in there. The third piece you're going to need to cut is the bucket itself. Because you're going to be cutting the hole in the lid, all you need is the rim for the ratcheting part that you're going to be mounting in the top of the water bottle once we cut the top of that water bottle off. What I've done is just determined that I want about 2 inches of that lip below the rim so that once it goes down inside the bucket, I've got plenty of room to drill holes through for the post screws or the bolts and nuts. They're going to hold those 2 pieces together. So I just went around 2 inches down, made some marks. Then you can connect those with a line just using one of those long zip ties. Works out well to connect those dots with a line to give you a guide to cut by. One nice thing to remember is this isn't rocket science, so being exact is not all that important when it comes to this. So we got a nice line to go around there. We're going to cut that. I've created my line on my lid that I'm going to be cutting through, and I know where on the bucket I've decided right where it starts flaring in from the widest point of the bucket up towards the snout. I'm going to cut right above that point there all the way around as well. Okay, so I'm headed outside with my cutting tool and these 3 pieces to do a little butcher work. All right, that messy part's done. Talk about sawdust out of plastic. So we've got the hole cut in the lid now. Again, that measures across 7 3/4 inches, roughly, for the funnel to fit down inside of it without going through it. Okay, so that's done. The top of the bucket is cut off, measured down about 2 inches. One other area that I cut off, if you look underneath these little flare downs, there's some extra ribbing there. I cut that out with the Dremel tool so that it's going to fit that much further down into the lip of the bucket. that we have now cut that top off of. So we don't need that anymore, we don't need that anymore, and we won't need that anymore. That's, you can hang on to if you ever do have to make a new one, or ever do decide to make a new one. You can use that to trace that hole again. That's what I did from a previous one I had made. So now this will go right down on top of there. Really nice. Leave the handle on there, makes a great carrying tool. When you are cutting those ribs out of there, be careful you don't cut through the little studs that are sticking through for the handle. If not, you're gonna lose your handle. Let's put that aside, and this aside, and let's do some funnel measurements and drilling and cutting. Again, on the funnel, we're gonna cut that bottom section off where the screen is, just up about 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch above where that bottom section is, and you're gonna be in the sweet spot. Certainly having a sharp razor blade makes it easier. Take your time, don't cut yourself or anything else you don't want to cut. Help to have a board instead of a piece of furniture right there. All right, screen is now cut out. That's removed, no more screen. The first funnel that I did, there's some nice little grooves on here. I thought how convenient. I use those grooves for my measurements, and I basically ended up cutting 6 slots. But what I found out over a period of a couple years of using it, as you can see, it got pretty scarred up from scraping a lot of lionfish into it and that were on the back side of it, is that it began to get a little looser than I liked. So instead of cutting 6 slots in the next funnel I did, I cut 5 slots instead. And this has given enough firmness on the current one I'm using now to still give, a little longer lifespan, holds its shape a little bit better, but it's still easy to get even a 16-inch lionfish. Shot a 2.3 pounder a couple weeks ago down inside of that bucket through that funnel. So what you want to do is measure all the way around it. You won't need this little guy, so we're going to cut it off. So in order to get a good mark on where these holes are going to need to be drilled and then the slits cut, we want to make 5 equally spaced marks around the diameter of the funnel. Now, because I've done one already, I've got the advantage of using it as a guide. But basically what it comes out to, if you use a tape measure, and the more flexible the tape measure, maybe the easier it is, I found that it's about 5.5 inches from mark to mark and on around the top of the funnel. And just put you a little mark on each of those 5.5 inch spots, because it's going to give you a guide when we measure down where to drill your holes at for the zip ties to go through. Got our marks around that. The measurement that I've found works best down from the lip of the funnel is just about 2.5 inches. Looks like I'm right on 2.5 inches. Again, it's not rocket science, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. And you're going to make a mark on all 5 of those spots, 2.5 inches down from the lip. So here we go. All right, so we got those marks. So that's going to be the top of the zip tie. Then it's got to have the bottom hole for that zip tie to come out. And as you see, there's the double number of holes all the way around. So every other hole will be for a zip tie. Every other hole will be for a rip stop. I was pretty certain that if I cut that slit would just keep growing if I didn't put basically a rip stop hole there for it. So those holes all just end up being in the same spot. So the distance down from the first hole to the second hole, if you want to measure from the lip down, you're talking another 2 inches, so a total of 4.5 inches to come down, or 2 more inches. Whatever ends up being the easiest for you to hold your tape measure and to still make that mark. That 4.5 inch mark works pretty well for me. So I could have made those marks all on the first turnaround. Now I'm going to skip the in-between holes first and make the ones that I've got already at the main 5.5 inch mark around. And then I'm going to come back and put those the marks in between, because I'll have a little bit better gauge of trying to get those in the right spot if I do those after these marks are made. So there's those 5 holes. Now I'm going to mark down 4.5 inches. I can even measure across if I want 4 inches. So we're talking 2 inches apart. Come up a little bit on that. So I'm going to use my leftover bottom part of that bucket just to catch some of the plastic that's going to spin off as we drill these holes. And again, it's not rocket science, so it's just 1 hole on each dot. So that's the bottom set. That's going to be for the bottom part of the zip ties and for the tops of the slits. So there's 10 of those holes. Now going back to the 5 holes we made, that'll be for the tops of each of the zip ties. Here we go. All the holes that need to be drilled are there. Now it's just a matter of cutting from the correct holes. Again, we're going to cut from the holes that are not corresponding to a hole that's higher up. We're going to go every other hole. We're going to cut straight down, at least as close to straight as we can. There are some little ribs in the funnel that gives you a little bit of a guide. Of course, having a sharp razor blade knife would be beneficial. The one that I've got in this knife is not as sharp as I would like. And we skip a hole, come to the 3rd hole. Again, skip a hole, skip a hole, and skip another hole, and this should be the last one. And it's a little You know, it's a little firm right now, but that's good. You're gonna be able to push a fish through there, no problem. And then when you pull the fish off, you can slide up one of the slits a little bit. Gives a little more resistance against the lionfish as you pull your pole spear back out of them. Funnel is complete. Time to put this in the lid and mark where our holes are gonna go around the edge of the rim, where the zip ties will go through the funnel and through the rim. So again, use our marker. I'd recommend you not put one right where the ratchet release is. Let that be in between two of the zip ties so you don't have it conflicting with pushing in on the ratchet button when you're trying to release the catch. So we're just going to put a mark around here for these 5 holes, and then we're going to put that hole pretty much right up against the outside. So I'm going to put the holes as close up against the next ridge where it rises up. Being on a work table would be a whole lot easier than sitting on a sofa. So you're going to pull each zip tie with the flat end towards the middle, because you're going to be wrapping them through the funnel, back up, back through the funnel again, and out. So give yourself about 1 inch, roughly. As you pull it through, you'll be able to snug it down a little bit more. I could probably go 1 more drill size larger. These are pretty snug getting through there, but that's okay. There's all 5 of those through there. Funnel in. Again, 1 more size larger on the drill bit. I used a 5/16. You could probably go just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to get the next size larger bit, put a little bit larger hole there, because I'm afraid over time that zip tie is going to cut sideways and the funnel might start ripping there. So I've jumped up to a 11 by 32nd bit. I don't need to drill the holes where the slits were cut. Just the 10 where the zip ties go through. Much better. Looking good. Now as we come out of this hole, we can go right through the zip tie. Don't snug it all the way down just yet. Let's get all 5 of them through first. Then we can make sure we got our funnel about as centered as possible and flat on there. And then we can snug them down, kind of like with lug nuts on your tire. You can go back and forth. Get them snug but not overly tight. The one thing that I like to do with that is it gives a nice attachment point. What I did on mine was I got one of these S hooks with the little releases, and it's amazing. I don't know if that's aluminum or some kind of a stainless, but very little rust. And that spring and that S hook has held up remarkably well for at least 2 years now. And what that does, it allows you to put your pole spear down inside the bucket and then easily latch the band onto there, and it holds your pole spear in there. So you've got it with your bucket, it's all one unit, and I'll demonstrate how I hold it when I'm rolling in off the side of the boat here in just a little bit. So the next thing is to cut these excess pieces off. The lid and the funnel, they're done. Let's come back to the main bucket and the rim. Now, because you're going to hold that handle, and it's nice to have this handle than to be, what was that called, perpendicular? Rather than doing it this way, I kind of like doing it like this. So I'm going to line that up there. And then you can look at your post screws, whichever ones you decided to get size-wise. Determine the best size hole that you're going to drill through there. You certainly don't want to drill a hole that's too big. Some people have used aluminum rivets. The problem with doing that is there's a little bit of space between the plastic water bottle and the rim of the bucket top. And the rivet puts so much torque or tension that it ends up cracking your plastic water jug. And you don't want to do that. The nice thing about the post screws is you can tighten it down on itself and it's still going to hold it nice and snug and not have to be so tight that it cracks the side of your plastic jug. I'm going to go with a 3/16. And again, I'm going to put 8 holes and I'm going to drill through both pieces at once. So I'm not too worried about marking it. I'm just going to go on either side of these 4 little flare down braces. Then take your post screw, and you've got the option of putting a little bit of Loctite in here. Insert the end, you put the Loctite on first. Line it up. And should have brought a flathead screwdriver. I went to my hardware store to pick up 8 of these guys. I could only find 2 in the drawer. So I'm going to be ordering some of the ones off of Amazon that you'll find a link to down in the description box. I think it's like a whole lot more than I'll probably ever need. But at 60 or 70 cents a set at Ace, I don't know. I'll have plenty for, I think it's pretty economical. So I'm finding a 7 32nd size drill bit is the best size for these holes, for these post screws, if you decide to go this route. So now that I've got those first two in there, I could drill my other 6 holes. Once I get the other post screws in, I can mount all of those, and we'll have this part done. If I had the post screws, I would certainly put each one in as I go around. So I'm going to leave those last 3 holes to drill after I get the post screws in, so that as I go around, I know my holes will be accurate as I'm mounting those in there. Those 2 that I got, they hold it for now, just for the demonstration. So the bucket is done, the lid is on, the ratchet on top is ready to go. The handle will clear over the top of that funnel, just enough where you can carry your bucket. And another good, great thing this comes in handy for is carrying stuff in there on your way to your dive boat. You can use it as a bucket. You get on the boat, take the lid off, empty the stuff out, and then you have it ready for your first dive. Hunting those lionfish. I will say that some people have felt that's a lot of drag to be carrying around under the water with you, and at times it can be a little bit of a pain. I have gotten used to it. You can experiment with what length leash you put on it. Mine's probably a little over 2 feet. I just braided that anchor line, had a loop in it that I put through the handle, pulled through, but then I just clipped this off on my left D-ring down by my hip, and it just floats behind me, as you'll see in some of my videos. If I am in some current, I'll tuck the bucket right up under my stomach and hold it to my chest. There's much less drag on you when you're swimming in a current that way. If I do get down on a spot that there's not a bad current on the bottom, I sometimes detach it. Okay, you could clip it off if there's something small enough, whether it's a chicken coop or something else you can clip it off to keep it from floating away. And then you're free of it while you're on the bottom if there aren't any lionfish. But normally it just drags around behind me, no problem. When I'm ready to roll in off the side of the boat, after I've clipped it to my D-ring, I'll just hold it between my knees as I'm sitting on the side of the boat, hold my spear gun, however else you're comfortable, holding your mask, the back of your mask strap. As I roll in, it's gonna come out from between my knees. I usually keep this over to the side. I did have one time when it was right here, and this kind of came and hit me in the face on the forehead. That wasn't too comfortable, but that's only happened once and many times. So that's how it works well for me. All right, let me know in the comments below what you think. Again, I'll add some additional information down there about some of these supplies and where you can get them. And I look forward to answering your questions, and I hope that this video has helped you to know that you can build your own lionfish bucket. God bless, and happy lionfish killing.